Marco,
Sean,
what have you been up to?
I don't know. I heard that you can foresee the future in these days.
I can foresee the future, and I know what you did. I've
You know
been
what
I've
I
been
did?
watching your file access and your database access.
Oh, wow. Not last week because I was there in the future too.
That's true. That's true.
You're monitoring me, huh?
I am monitoring you,
Well, that's
but only
good.
for good
You keep
reason.
me safe, right? If you monitor what I
It's
do.
it's to keep you safe and keep the company safe.
I'm good with that. I don't know. Let's see what Terry thinks about it.
That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to look at a couple areas. Some people call it data risk intelligence. Some call it posture management or configuration management for data security. Um, Ultimately, it's all about understanding how and where your data goes and ensuring that it's being used properly and within guidelines and regulatory compliance requirements and all that fun stuff.
We don't have 3 days, so we're gonna have to focus
Well,
on
that's
something.
why we have Terry, because Terry has all the answers in short
He has
form.
the good metaphors.
He
That's
does
that's
have the
what
good
when I think
metaphors as
about
well.
Terry, I think like he's gonna come up with some good metaphor with what we're gonna talk about. But before we go there, come on, let's be serious. Terry Ray, Imperva, I think we had a list. This is probably a fourth conversation that we share talking about what you do, and why don't we just start there? What do you do, Terry, at Imperva? You've been there for a while.
It reminds me of the movie Office Space. So, what would you say you do here?
What do you think you're doing?
I do a lot. I mean, I just keep it brief and short. My title is CTO for data security, but I try to talk with users and customers and end users in the field, prospects, really anybody who wants to talk about data security. And I think that's one of the advantages and luxuries I have as a expert in the field that's been doing strictly data security for over 20 years. I may not always be right, to be honest, but I always have something to say, and so I love to talk. And so that's what they let me do, is they let me talk and have conversations and see where those conversations take us. And so it lets me help drive the product, and it helps me help customers get where they want to go.
And that's actually an interesting question, perhaps, is where do customers want to go? Yeah, I don't know. What's changed recently?
Yeah, you asked a good question, right? So for years, I would ask customers, is your data important? Do you want to secure your data? And arguably, we would say that's where customers want to go. They want to secure their data. But interestingly, time and time and time again, we talk to a customer and the customer says, I do want to secure my data, but, and it's a big but. That but is, but where I want to begin is with my most sensitive data, the data that is credit cards or whatever else, whatever type of private data is important to that organization. And where organizations have gotten to in their journey to where they want to be is they've gotten to a place where they say, I've met my regulatory compliance, and now it's hard for me to justify doing anything else. Security, we like to think that justifying security isn't hard to do. But in fact, in a lot of cases, to go get budget to justify a little bit more security can actually be pretty complex if you don't have real quantifiable metrics and numbers that go right along with your risk in the organization. And data, I think, is one of those places where it hasn't really had quantifiable metrics on it ever. And so organizations just kind of stick a finger in the air and they say, well, you know who's telling me I'm doing a good job? My PCI council is telling me I'm doing a good job. So I must be doing a good job. Tick, I'm done. And they wait until they get breached.
You know, a funny story. Sean is trying to sell his house, and
I'm
no,
always trying to sell the house.
we talked about that in preparing for this conversation. There was a metaphor that I think we can develop then in what you just said, which is like where you draw a line when you just check the boxes, and when you could do a little bit more to actually improve even the value of your posture and what you have. So tell me about that idea that you had about the house selling. We don't need to talk about Sean.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, so the analogy that I like to use around what the industry is calling this quantifiable metric, this ability to say, I know whether I'm doing a good job or bad job. They're calling this industry the data security posture management. Other people would know it earlier on as cloud posture management, where it wasn't about data, it was about my cloud configuration. So all of this in general, posture management, what is my configuration? How am I doing? I don't want to say it began with LinkedIn, but it's the one that pops into my head. Is when you go to LinkedIn, you set up a profile. It says, hey, you're only 75% done. You've got 6 more things to go do. Go do these and get your profile set up. Well, I think we do the same thing here. And it's a great analogy, I think, is a house. And I don't know how it works all around the world. I can only tell you how it works in the US. And in the US, if you're going to have a mortgage, if you're not paying cash for your house, which I don't think many people do, but if you're not paying cash for your house, you're borrowing money. And if you're borrowing money, a bank says, we need to understand really what's wrong with this house. We don't want to be buying something that just is way underwater. So you hire a house inspector, and that house inspector comes in and looks at everything in the house. If they're a good inspector, they look at it all. And they tell you where all of your problems are. And they fix exactly 0 of them. They just tell you where your problems are. And for the purpose of what you pay for, that's what they're there for. They're to tell you this is what your problems are, and now you can begin whatever else you want to do in your negotiation and buying and whatever else you're going to do. And I think that's very much like the traditional and the more recent data security posture management systems. They tell you where you have problems in IT, in your data. Your data is not encrypted. It's not monitored. It's got public access to a cloud data store. It's got a myriad set of problems that are out there. Do what you want to with it. Here's the information. You paid me. I'm the inspector. I inspected your systems, and there's your answer. And while that answer is really powerful and really helpful for the problem that I stated earlier, which is to try and get an organization over the hump of saying, I think I'm okay. I think I'm doing a good job. Now this system's coming back and saying, well, you know what? You actually have termites. You have foundation issues. You've got a hole in the roof. You've got a lot of issues you hadn't really thought about. It's just they're in areas you don't spend any time in, so you haven't noticed. And so it is a lot like that house inspector. And that's, to me, it's a double-edged sword. So what it comes down is they're saying, here's all your problems. And the organization can say, well, I know my problems, and now I can choose to fix those problems or not. Now the organizations have a little bit different issue. The new issue is, okay, now for me to fix my problems, what technologies, what solutions, what people, what skills, what is it that I need to go and fix this? And in some cases, they may tell you, yes, you need to go encrypt. They're not going to say go buy an encryption product or go buy a monitoring product. They're just going to say there's no monitoring. You figure out how to go do it, just like an inspector would do. And that's the big gap, I think, that has existed in this space for years, or now over the more recent years. And that's the one that, at least at Talos, we're trying to overcome and say you should be able to do more than be an inspector. You should be able to be an inspector, a recommender, and ultimately a problem solver.
Yeah, and I think one of the examples that I like to bring up on this is because you talked about cloud posture management and shifting to data security posture management, because it's one thing to look at the house. You mentioned foundation as well, but in my personal experience, there's also the hillside that might be coming down. You have to hire a geologist, right, to see, are you in a fire zone? Some of these things the bank wants to know from a mortgage risk perspective. Some things I wanted to know from a life-saving perspective. Is that hill going to come down on me in a big rainstorm? And to your point, you bring people together to identify what's going on, and then you have to make a decision. Is there enough? Is it risky where I have to fix it? Is it something that I can just deal with and kind of maintain over time? And you need experts to do that, and then you need the experts to help you remediate. And I think that's where this story really comes together for me, Terry, is in the remediation, understanding, well, what systems is it? Are they in the cloud? Are they on-prem? Are they databases? Are they data storage distributed throughout the world because of data sovereignty requirement? What do I have that I have to deal with to maintain compliance, but also to maintain a good security posture for my own business benefit?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look, I think you bring up a really good point where here we talk about, the analogy of the inspector really doing this for the mortgage company, right? The company that's giving you a mortgage. But really, when you look at the value to the home buyer, the person buying the house, what do I want to actually know? Do I actually want to know just what's wrong with my house, to your point? Or do I want to know, am I in a flood zone? That's going to be a different vendor. That's not the inspector. That's my real estate agent. They're going to be looking at that analysis. To your point, is the hill going to come down? Has there ever been a mudslide? And if there has, what was the damage associated with that? What's the crime in the area? That's going to be a different piece that I bring into this area. This comes down ultimately to risk, right? And that's the value. That's what the bank is trying to get out of it in terms of the property. The owner is trying to understand, in this property, if I live here, am I in a cul-de-sac? Am I not in a cul-de-sac? Do I have lots of traffic? Might I have kids that have higher risk by playing in the street or not in the street? All of those things have to come together. And I think as we see this industry of data security posture management solutions, today, for the most part, DSPM, which is the acronym for all of that, DSPM tend to be focused in the cloud, which means they're not getting the complete picture of everything on-prem. So they're not getting that big picture. And they tend to also focus on just those configurations that you can get out of the cloud providers. So CloudTrail and AWS and other tools that you get in Azure and other places, effectively readily available configuration information from the data stores themselves that just about anybody could honestly get, and they just correlate them and build a risk model around it. What I'm seeing now is a demand from users saying that information is nice, but I actually need a lot more to understand a true metric, a quantifiable metric. If I'm going to take this and say I'm actually doing a good job and there's a low risk of a breach, I need to know about my cryptographic capabilities, not just in the cloud where I flip a switch in AWS, but on-prem where it takes equipment, it takes stuff, it takes work. I need to know, to your point about a hillside that's happening on the outside. So may not be a hill in IT. In this case, it might be more around DLP. So do I have DLP? It's a completely separate vendor, but it's context that comes into the environment. I think DSPM vendors ultimately are going to be very much, honestly, like SIM, security incident event monitoring systems, right? So I think they're going to be very much like those types of systems where they just bring in any data you want to. I think an organization is ultimately going to decide, I have one DSPM because it has that extensibility to bring in lots of different data sources together and allow me to marry those data sources to build my own risk. For example, I want to know if I have sensitive data relevant to GDPR. Well, I want to bring in information from my audit solution that says, under GDPR, these are the things, this is the type of technologies you need to have at play. Otherwise, you're at risk for violation of GDPR as well as risk of a breach. I want two metrics that are inside there, my risk of a breach and my risk of noncompliance. I think there's a lot that people want to do with DSPM in the long run. I don't think DSPM is totally there yet, but I think we're beginning to see, certainly with Talos, we're seeing this open framework to be able to say, I want to customize my risk. I don't want it canned. I want to bring in other sources. And I want to be able to build a model that takes in all of the risk elements, not just the ones that are relevant to one environment or another environment or important to one person or another person. I want it to be something that the whole organization can use to drive up to the executive staff.
So the business is kind of changing the attitude, let's say. It's kind of changing from, they're telling me I need to fix this if I want to sell the house in this case, and that's all I'm going to do. But I'm going to get this much for the house. Is there anything that then I should do to either, because I live here, I want to live a better life, or I want to get more money that can turn into an investment. And I want to connect to your idea that you mentioned about the gamification of, the LinkedIn or any other social media, where you say, well, at least put your profile and who you are. Now, you could do a lot better. You can improve your status. You can be get more visibility, create more content, post at least twice a week or more. So to go back at the question, is the attitude of the business changing, or are they still, because of budget limits, to stuck to, I don't care, whenever happen, I'm just going to fix the bare minimum? And by bear, I mean the bears that Sean has on his property because he feeds them.
So I think there's two elements there, right? So the one element is budget's always going to be an issue, but what evidence can you bring into a budget cycle to get the appropriate budget for what you want to do? And at the same time, that goes right along with that to get executive buy-in for a mission. And the mission is better data security. And we'll come to that. I think the other piece is about understanding a maturity path, understanding what you want to do. The word is prioritization, right? So how do I prioritize all of these things that I need to do? If I have one file server or one database, I don't really need to prioritize anything. It's easy. If I have 100 or 1,000, or I know financial services that have 40,000 databases, and trust me, they have a long way to go in their maturity cycle to get to where they want to be. They need something to help them prioritize that, and that's the other aspect of I think a strong data security posture management solution is not just telling you what your problems are and telling you what you can go fix, but helping you prioritize based on those actions, those solutions, those switches you can flip, whatever it happens to be, that you can do today that will give you the biggest bang for your buck. And that buck isn't always $1. Sometimes it's 5 minutes of time. Sometimes it's a switch, sometimes whatever. But the point is what can I do today that's going to do the most reduction in risk? That's what I want to do on Monday. And I think that's what organizations have been starving for years, is to say, all right, this week, I'm going to spend 25% of my time on data security. And if I'm going to spend that 25% of the time, I want to make it count. So what am I doing this week? I'm going to solve for these three things that, Imperva, Talus's data security fabric is telling me, data risk intelligence, what we call it. Our solution is telling you, we'll give you 5 points back on your risk. We will reduce your risk by 5 points if you will go do this one thing. Just do this, I'll lower your risk. That is helpful, I think, for an organization to say, this week, what did we do? I don't know about all organizations, but I know I typically give an update to my higher ups, if you will, and say, this is what I did this week. Isn't it great to be able to tell them I reduced the risk on our riskiest asset by 10% this week by doing two things, and it didn't cost me a penny? Or I have a preparation in place. I'm ready for the next budget cycle, and I'm going to reduce it by 30% because I need to do something, right? And I want to do this. I want to do it right. Going back to your point about budget, the other piece that works in tandem with this is, okay, now I've got a priority. Now I've got a plan. Now I know exactly what needs to be done in my organization. And now I can decide, of all of these things I need to do, some of them I can do and they don't require budget. They barely require effort. They just need me to go do some things. There are going to be some things that probably will require some budget, maybe even require a headcount or some education or something else. That requires me to go to my executive staff. And in my executive staff, I need to bring to them this quantifiable evidence and say, look, all the money we've spent so far, we're doing a good job on the systems that were our priorities. Our regulated systems, they're great, low risk. Here's the map. It's very low risk on those systems. We've succeeded. However, as an organization, we agreed that our mission is not data compliance. Our mission is data security. And if we're all on the same page still now after months or years or whatever it is, data security is still our plan. I have put together a program and a plan over the next whatever period of time you want it to be that we want to turn this data compliance program we have into a data security program by covering all these assets that may not be regulated, but have all the highest level of breach in a quantifiable manner. And here's my plan, and here's how we want to do it. And the goal is to unblock the river, if you will, wipe out that beaver dam, get it out of the way, and say, let's let the floodwaters flow of data security, and let's do something different than we've done before. Let's not just be compliant. Let's finally be secure, and let's all be on the same page. And I think that's the important thing, is to bring the executive staff all together on that same page, recognizing that they need to be doing something different. And when you put numbers in front of them, I think that's helpful.
And so in terms of that, so the conversation with executive staff, senior leaders, business unit leaders, oftentimes here's what you need to do, driven by compliance, is by an auditor that speaks a certain language, that drives a certain team to respond. Sometimes security is involved, sometimes they're not. Risk is involved, sometimes they're not. The database people are involved, sometimes they're not. System maps and API folks are involved, sometimes they're not. So how do you see organizations kind of pulling all that together beyond just the compliance? Because I think that's also another area that can be difficult if they're used to looking at things a certain way and hearing a certain language and expecting a certain set of actions that now are broader, more meaningful, but it require multiple stakeholders to actually get things done.
Yeah, no, I think one of the places I've been spending a lot of my time recently is not so much with security. I'm going to call it my spare time, but I don't have a lot of that. But the times that I'm not at RSA, I'm not at different types of large security events, I find myself at global ISACA events, audit events. I find myself at the International Internal Auditor events in Vegas and other places. I find the other half of my job, and I'm going to use the word corrupting, but the other half of my job is trying to corrupt the auditor. And corruption's not really the bad word. It's just a controversial word to be able to put out there and say, look, what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to bring the auditors on to ask them to ask better questions. Really, the auditors should already be here saying, wait, so especially internal audit. So we have PCI servers and they're doing a great job. Let's say we've used data security posture management and we're doing a great job on these PCI servers. But as internal audit, it's not just about regulatory compliance. It's about keeping the company safe, keeping the brand safe. So tell me about those other servers that are out there, those other systems that are storing data out there. What's the risk on that? That's low risk also. It shouldn't be difficult. If you've got if you have the information, how am I doing on my regulated systems and how am I doing on my unregulated systems? I will tell you the overwhelming majority of data stores in the overwhelming majority of companies that are out there, the regulated systems will be given a mediocre score. At least they'll be passing their audits. The unregulated systems will be the Wild West. Development servers, test servers, user acceptability testing, all these servers that all have private data in them have almost no security on them whatsoever. And that should be really scary to the organization. But most organizations don't have the quantifiable metrics to really understand the risk between those two systems. Now they do. And now that should be really easy to have that conversation with any cross-functional department and say, shouldn't we be doing better here? Yes, we should. Yes, I have yet to fathom a response that would be a non-positive response to say, yeah, I think we should be doing something better there.
So, Terry, I want to go back to the idea of not only coming to point the problem, but actually having solution to fix it. Because we had a conversation not too long ago about when you can say, if you give me this budget, I can save you this much money. And we were talking about this with e-commerce or financial fraud prevention. So like, hey, you give me $2 million, I'm going to save you $4 million. Here's the money. If I give you $4 million, do you save me $8 million? Right? So
okay.
I want to connect with going back to say, well, this is not only what the problem is, and then you deal with it, but here's what the problem is. This is how you can fix it. We can fix it, or tell you who can fix it. And this is what your return is going to be in the long run. I mean, it seems a much easier sell in order to get the budget instead of waiting for a breach. That's usually when you get the budget.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot more sense for organization. We see more and more consolidation every day in the cybersecurity space, cybersecurity vendor space anyway. And it makes far more sense for an organization to say, I want to hire somebody, or I want to have a technology, whatever it is. I want to spend some money to solve a problem. My problem is I don't know where my problems are. So I'm going to hire somebody who has a truck, and they're going to pull that truck up out front. When they pull the truck up out front, it's not a little pickup truck with no tools in the back and just a guy who gets out with a clipboard. It's a big truck with shovels and hammers and wrenches and machines and all the other tools necessary. So as that person digs around your house and does everything they're going to do, they say, here's all your problems, and here are the problems I can fix for you today. I can take care of it right now. It's under the same contract you've already done. Let's just wrap it all up and get it all done right now. And what I'm going to leave you with are the following problems that I don't fix, but they're just switches. You just need to go take a few minutes and go flip some switches for you. I'll take care of the hard stuff for you. And to me, that's what's the power. That's the power here, is to be able to bring all of the capabilities behind Talus, the technology around cryptography and key management, as well as all of the monitoring and all the capabilities that we've always known from an Imperva perspective. They've been put together to be able to make this happen. So from a security perspective, you get the visibility, the observability, the ability to monitor anything you want and detect threats. You mentioned DLP, to detect threats and all these things. At the same time, if you don't want to allow somebody to have access to something because they're not supposed to, let's go into the world of AI. I get this asked this question all the time. I'm putting in AI, an AI chatbot. How do I prevent it from going places it's not supposed to? I need guardrails on the data it's allowed to access. How do I make sure people can't get access to the data AI is accessing directly? Right, so all of those controls can be brought to bear, and it makes it really, really easy for an organization to say, I want to know what my problems are, and I want you to fix my problem straight away and be done with it. I don't want you to just tell me to go to 3 or 4 different vendors and me figure out where I'm going and doing it, because that's going to cost me a lot more money and time, because I've got to test every single one of those vendors anyway and then go through projects, and it becomes a multi-year process, which just doesn't make sense for most people.
And some may just be turning on and off a switch, as you say, and some may be making an entire new system going. So again, go back to prioritization and say, well, at least let's do this right now, and then plan for the next one when the budget comes.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, in one case the air filters are dirty. That's easy. The other case, the air conditioner doesn't work. That's a big different. That's a different case, right? But
it's an all different thing.
So I want to go back to one of the things we talked about, because I think we're creatures of habit as humans, and I think business becomes a creature of habit as well. And when we have predefined audits, we're kind of prescribed, or at least we report back to the auditors, here's the scope, right? And we set that scope and we kind of dust it off and we say, that's where we're going to live within our audit year after year after year, until something changes where we think we need to readjust the scope. And I think AI may be one of those triggers. Mm-hmm. You may confirm that, but even without a trigger, are you finding there are AI as a trigger? Are there other triggers that say we need to adjust our scope to move beyond the audit world to understand the bigger picture? Let's look at the land, the land around the building, the crime around the neighborhood, that kind of thing, to better understand what the challenges are that we're really facing.
Before data security posture management, before DSPM, I would argue that apart from audit, which is going to happen every year, and you're going to decide through classification and other things whether there's a new place that you need to audit for regulatory compliance because you found a name or an address or a phone number or something. Apart from that, really the only needle mover on now I need to do something different on systems that are not regulated was either I got breached or my neighbor got breached. You have a breach? Oh, well, that opens up the pocketbook, or that opens up a conversation at the executive level to say, how is that not going to happen to us again? Or how are we not going to be like company XYZ because they're in our same industry? And that happens every single time. And that's good for about 3 to 4 months. And then everybody forgets about it and they go back to where it was. So as a CISO, you've got a short window to say, let's make things happen now and make a change. With DSPM now, with the new technology now, it's every day. Every day, the goal is to be in your face. Maybe it's a little annoying, possibly, to say, you know what, hey, you did a little work yesterday, but you know what, there's still work to be done. There's still other things to be fixed. The system that you fixed yesterday is not nearly as at risk today as it was yesterday. It was 80% at risk yesterday. Today it's 70% at risk, but there's still about 6 or 7 more things you could do. There's always risk, right? If you're connected to the internet, if it's not mission impossible and a server in a room and the guy coming down from the ceiling, and clearly there's risk there too, but that you're not getting away from risk. We're just wanting to get to a point of acceptable risk, something that we can tolerate and say, this is industry standard. This is kind of where we are going to likely operate. The 30, 40% range is probably where we're going to be. So can you get it down there? I think that's where people want to go. And so this does give them now something beyond the normal regulatory audit, which you're guaranteed to have. And there's a fine right behind it if you're not doing it, which is why they get budget, or the breach, which is insurance in essence. So if you don't think you're going to get breached, you might not get a cavity. Maybe you don't need insurance. Maybe you don't need that checkup. Who knows? Now you've got this other piece that's in your face every single day. This is the grandmother. And DSPM is your grandmother saying, you need to eat right. You need to eat more. You need to clean up. You need to take a bath. You need to do every single day, always in your face. And so to me, that's the case. And now you have that reason. As long as you're using it, as long as you're paying attention to it, you have the evidence that you need to do what you need to do to move from compliance or a knee-jerk reaction on a breach to just everyday best practice, which is where we should all be anyway.
Do you ever get the question, what else you got? Instead of saying, hey, you could also do this. It's like, hey, keep it bringing.
There's always something new coming, right?
Yeah. Well, in an ideal world, that will be the question that you get. Like, what else can you do?
No, I mean, look, we get that question commonly, and I'll say probably the biggest question, as a real question, the biggest question we've gotten over the last 20 years has been, you do everything that you do for databases, but what about my unstructured data? What about my file servers? Can you help me there also? And so that's actually a big effort that Thales is, frankly, a big part of the reason Thales acquired Imperva is to say, we think we can do both. We think we should be able to do both. And in fact, you're going to see us doing both. We can bring in, if you've got AWS, S3 or other systems or file servers on-prem, interestingly, Thales already has agents for those file servers. I won't go into the details of it, but point is being able to answer a really simple question around DSPM, where do you have problems? Well, I have problems here, here, and here. Well, tell me what Terry did. Terry's one of your problem people in your organization. Tell me what he did. I want to know every file he touched. I want to know every database he got into, every app he went to. I want to know every key he used. I want to know everything about Terry. In the world before this acquisition, you had to go to at least 2, probably 3 or 4 different technologies and piece all of this together to build the puzzle of what does Terry do. Our goal here is to give you one place with the puzzle already built, and you just get the picture. What did Terry do? And here's your snapshot. This is Terry, everything he does. And that's the most common question I think I get at this point is, if you can do one, why can't you do the other?
And do you have any examples you can share, Terry, around, I don't know, maybe an industry or two where organizations are looking to answer certain questions? I don't know, they might be the AI-driven ones, but to your point, what did Terry do with the AI chatbot, or what did our customer do with certain things? So do you have any examples that help describe the business scenario that's really driving the reason that there is data in the first place, and users using it and the need to protect that connection.
Yeah, yeah, and this is aside from the reason for regulatory compliance, reasons why organizations would do this, other than somebody else told me I need to, right? A GDPR auditor said you go do this or else. Organizations come to us all the time and say, I need to know what's going on in my environment. Now, these are the security forward organizations. Oftentimes, these are organizations who have been burnt in the past, and now they're coming around and they're saying, I have the project, it is live, and now I want to make sure this doesn't happen again in my environment. How do I detect this? And the biggest question that I get in this is the organizations that are asking the questions just don't have the expertise in data security. There are so few users. And I'm pretty certain I've talked to you guys even about this before, but I'll say it again. And I pick on LinkedIn a lot, but if you go to LinkedIn and in quotes, you type in database security, you're going to find about 36,000 people that claim to be database security experts. You can cut that in half and find the actual experts, and the others are not experts. Do the same thing for file security, and you're going to find even fewer people that claim to be experts. There just aren't experts in security in the data plane. And so these organizations are coming to us saying, how can you help me augment my staff? And it's not about people, it's about automation and tools. And so for a lot of this, you mentioned AI, a lot of the use of AI that we see today is large language models and small language models and these other tools and things that we're seeing today. But we've been using forms of AI and unsupervised learning and others for many years, for decades. And one of the big value propositions behind leveraging, I'm just going to call it AI, even though it's a bit different field, but machine learning and others behind AI, is the ability to consume vast amounts of data. And when we think about data security, that is all it is gathering vast amounts of activity. I want to watch everything happening in an organization, not just your sensitive prioritized servers, because that's not a good data set. If I'm going to use machine learning, that's not a large language model. That's a very selective language model. I want the big model of everything happening in your environment. That way I can compare Sean's activity to Marco's activity and Sean's activity to Sean's prior activity. All of that is really critical when you're trying to do data security, because the alternative to using machine learning to detect threats is using signatures. Signatures means that you are an expert and you know every bad way somebody could do every bad thing in your environment, and nobody knows all of that about their environment. So signatures just don't work in this space. You have to have a volume of data, broad data sets, the 3 or 5 V's of data science. You have to have all of that come together into a model to be able to say, I know what Terry did and he didn't do it right. He's doing something really weird, because I watch him, I watch Sean, I watch Marco, I watch my apps, and I watch my AI. And I can tell you he's doing it like none of them. And he's accessing an awful lot of data. I think I probably need to take a look. That's not a signature. That's just knowledge. And that's the power, I think, that happens once you can bring all of this together. And that's a big part of what we do.
So there's human behavior you're certainly speaking to there. And also system behavior. I look at things often from a workflow perspective. Things move from A to Z, and they take different paths based on different user behavior or different business requirements, or that's just the way the systems are configured. It's running through one country or another. Do you find because a lot of this stuff is designed maybe well from the beginning and then morphs over time, right? Things creep, systems get added, companies get acquired, new database technologies come around and support new features. I guess what I'm wondering is, do you find there are knockoff benefits beyond just security where users find better performance because the data is managed better and the systems using them are connected more tightly, and therefore there's less delay, or maybe even some outward facing benefits of we're able to demonstrate a level of trust to our partners and our customers that we weren't able to before because we've shored up some of these things. Are there any knockoff benefits like that beyond just we have a better posture?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, you've got once you start looking at data, once you've accepted the fact that you should do the same thing in your data space as you do on your endpoint, don't we all watch everything happening on our endpoints, and don't we watch everything happening in our network with network filters and everything else happening? Once we start doing that same practice in the data, what it now means is it's not just about security, exactly to your point. I can start to say in this database, in this database, I have a very long running query that takes actually a very long time to produce, and it's going directly to an API. If I can shorten that query or do something in that workload, I can make my actual business and the operation between the business faster. And we've had this report for a long time. I'll admit, I focus on security, but I've known the report was there for years, and I know our users use the report. But our security team and customers typically give access to these systems to other departments exactly for that reason, right? So they'll give limited access to the interface and say, okay, you're the developers. I know you don't need to know anything about the security and everything going on, but I do have a model of how this database or this file server or this application actually operates day to day. How fast is it? How slow is it? Which queries might be broken? Which queries are operating efficiently? Use that. And the other piece to this is about user rights. User rights is a big part of this, and it's a huge gap that people have that usually they don't do anything with it. I would argue that it sits in security, but it benefits the organization quite a lot by minimizing the impact of an application or an API that would be using data it really shouldn't be. And I'm going to tell you a story. I'm not going to tell you the name of the company, but so there's an organization that we work with, and for years they had been monitoring all of their data, monitoring, collected all the data. And the first time we brought out our analytic platform, we said, let's funnel all of your data that you've collected for years through it, and let's just see if you missed anything, because you've been using our system for years. Let's see how much better the analytic platform is than, let's say, pure regular expressions and signatures. They quickly identified that what they had human users that were accessing data in a database that only the applications and the APIs ever access, or at least ever look at. There's, when you look at data in a database, you can look at the data or you can manage the data. There's other things, but there's the difference between opening a file and reading it and moving a file from point A to point B. Same thing in a database. So they had these human users that were actually looking at data that only the applications would. Now, normally you might say, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal here was that those applications and APIs were actually only accessed by federal law enforcement, Homeland Security, and others. They had very restricted access to these applications. However, the people that were accessing were database administrators. And what those database administrators were doing is they were watching their significant other to see whether or not they were going through certain places on the road, and it was able to track them on those certain places on the road. And they say, make sure, did you go to the mall this week or did you not go to the mall this week? You said you did. It wasn't nefarious. It was just personal benefit, if you will. But it was a violation of corporate policy, if not, I don't know if it's federal policy, but certainly a violation of privacy, though we don't have those laws in the United States at this point, but violation of personal privacy that they have there. And so it's these kinds of stories, I think, that organizations have to realize actually happen all of the time. I mean, how often do organizations really monitor access to Salesforce.com, to ServiceNow, to some of the places where there's a lot of private data? And if you think that you have a salesperson that if they're about to leave the company doesn't go and look at their Rolodex in Salesforce.com and maybe take a snapshot or print it off or something, I think you'd be really surprised. You shouldn't be, but how surprised you should be at how frequently that happens, that people will go and do that. It's not, arguably, it's a gray area between a data theft and not a data theft, but are you monitoring it? Are you looking at it? These are the kinds of things that organizations will come to us and say, it's not regulated data for the most part, but these are the kinds of things I'm trying to solve for. And usually they're trying to solve for it because they identified it at one point some crazy way, and they want to see how much more it's happening, and then they learn the truth.
Well, I want to finish with a philosophical thought, which is when you think about ideal, they're meant not to be reached because they kind of go away from you. I kind of see security as that, right? You said it before. Perfect security, we know it doesn't exist. New technology allow you to discover new things. And you mentioned a few that maybe 10, 15 years, 20 years ago, you wouldn't even think about being a security issue. And I want to connect it with that bar, right? Are you ever going to get to 100? Or when you get to, the closer you get, 95, 96, then it kind of like get more and more away from you. But that's not the problem. The problem is not to act on it and thinking, because I'm never going to reach 100, I don't care, right? I mean, you still need to thrive to the best you can do and be ready for what's coming next. So that's, I wanted to throw that there as a...
That's the problem we run into, right? It's why I think security people have a hard time getting budget. You can use the analogy of it's a cat and mouse game. There's always something different. Tom's always got a different hammer and Jerry's always running a different way. Or you can say hackers are like water. They're going to take the path of least resistance. You put resistance, it'll find a way around it, through it, one way or the other. And that's the frustration, I think, that executives have, which is you just told me to solve this problem. I needed to do X.
And now
I need X plus one. And so that's the challenge. And that, yes, because plus one exists because we put X in place. The one wouldn't be here if we didn't put X in place. It would be going through. So it's a cat and mouse game. And it's one of the reasons why I love what I do. Mm-hmm. I know people that do the same thing over and over and over again, and they love what they do. For me, I love the fact that this industry is constantly evolving and constantly changing. I realize that's a frustration for the practitioners that are out there, but that's the world we live in, right? We are trying to catch the bad guys, and they're always looking for another way around whatever control is in place.
Well, there are multiple Toms, multiple Jerrys.
That's right.
And they're scaling out of control. And I think for me, it's the reason why a partnership with you and your team in Imperva make a lot of sense. So you said it's hard for the practitioner to keep up in what, right? And that's where you come in, and that's where your investments in the Imperva security, data security fabric come into play. And you just described a previous investment in the analytics, right? Bringing to bear a new capability. So I think, working with you and your team really helps the practitioner and their teams and their business leaders keep up to date and on top of things. So you take the brunt for them.
That's the case, right?
You do the heavy lifting.
That's where we are, right? And that's where we've tried to do what we've tried to do with the new capability of data security posture management, what we call data risk intelligence, is to be able to shine a little bit of light, give you a little bit of that picture of there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just the tunnel continues to grow, but the light's there and it's not getting any further away. As long as you're doing something to maintain and keep up with it, you'll stay with the light. You'll never catch the light. You'll never get out of the tunnel, but you can stay with that light. And so our goal here is to at least enlighten organizations and practitioners that there are things you should be doing today to stay with current events, do these things, and trust me, there will be some new things. Organizations are going to cause their own new things. I don't know if it's Marco or Sean, one of you said it. You're going to go through an acquisition and you're going to see a spike in your risk because all of a sudden there's new assets. Call it that's a bad day or it's a good day. You've got something to do. You've got something to go prove and go get something done. Or now you've got a lot of work to do. However you want to look at it, but you've got a picture now. You know where the light is. Head that direction and go get those things done.
Yeah, and if you level up before, you're more ready than if you didn't do anything. So that's the lesson right there. I always enjoy, Terry, the conversations with you. If people want to check the directory page Imperva on ITSP Magazine, they can find another 3 with you, always entertaining and very, very insightful, as well as many other conversations with other leaders at Imperva. So that's what I suggest people to do. And I for sure look, and I know there will be another one, another conversation with you very soon.
I'm looking forward to it. It's always a pleasure for you guys. And it doesn't matter if you're in the U.S. or traveling all around. So it's always a pleasure with you.
In the past, in the future, who knows?
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Well, thanks, Terry, and thanks everybody for listening and watching. Do connect with Terry and the team, and stay tuned for more conversations. And we'll see you here back on ITSP Magazine soon.